Well, I was born in a little town in northwest Germany, close to the Dutch-German border. I think it was about 10 miles off the border. And I don't mind telling you my age either. It was in March 1923. And I can remember the first 10 years of my life was, well, I had nothing to talk about really, because it was no different from anybody else. The only difference was that there was only a very small Jewish community within the town, and I think it'd be about 10, 12 families, something like that. And being that small community, they couldn't afford an all-Jewish school. So all the Jewish children went to the normal Christian schools within the town. Any problem? None whatsoever. You were looked upon exactly the same as everybody else. You were a pupil of the town and enjoyed life. You had your friends, you had your playmates, you had a good home, loving parents, and there was nothing missing really that you could think of. Then the time came that changed life for Jewish people, not only in this little town, but, well, practically worldwide. And it came not a day after Hitler came to power. It took a little bit of time to get the constant anti-Jewish and anti-minorities propaganda to take hold. And why did it take hold? Now, this is my own opinion. Namely, there was mass unemployment in Germany at the time. There were no unemployment benefits to be got. So everybody had to fight for their own, living really, or their own way to carry on living. And when you think about it, anybody that's got nothing, have got nothing to lose. So they'll try anything. And I believe that helped Hitler to come to power. The other thing was he maintained that certain minorities, and Jews especially, were vermin. And that meant vermin had to be destroyed. Another theory of his was that the Jews forced Germany to lose the First World War. And there are many other things, but that was enough. And he then systematically, through mass propaganda, convinced people that his theory was right. Now, coming back to my own life, which is probably more interesting than hearing what Hitler done. Namely, I went to one of the Christian schools in the town for 4 years in the primary school there, and to be honest, thoroughly enjoyed it. I can't remember any day that I would say, oh, I wish I didn't have to go to school. Because at that time, school was where you met your friends, where you had your playmates, and enjoyed life. And then, about 2, maybe 3 years into the Hitler period, the constant propaganda took hold. You lost all your friends, you lost all your playmates, and you were being bullied at school mentally and physically every day. And that meant every moment that you spent in the playground between lessons and on the way home, I personally was attacked physically and mentally. It meant education didn't have any place whatsoever, because you just couldn't, well, I certainly couldn't concentrate to learn anything. But if I'd never been to school, I wouldn't have been any worse off. I hadn't got any certificates of any description. I couldn't even prove, if I'd had to, that I ever went to school. But I was determined, although I had to put up with being bullied and, as I said, physically and mentally attacked every day for nearly 3 years of my school time, I never learned anything. I just could not concentrate. I remember my parents arranged for private tuition. Didn't make no difference. The whole thing had gone into my system of head that I just couldn't learn anything. I could not concentrate on anything whatsoever. But luckily, my dad was a cattle dealer, and we kept cattle from time to time for a very short period, and it got my job to look after them. And that was the best time in my life, because nobody came onto our premises to bother me. So after school time, I had the most wonderful life. I loved doing this bit of work. I mean, it wasn't hard work, not at that then, but it may have been for me if I really can think back. But looking at it back, it never appeared to be a heavy job. I enjoyed it. Why? As I say, nobody came anywhere near me. I'd already lost all friends and playmates. It didn't matter. I'd got something to keep me occupied and thoroughly enjoyed it. And as far as the bullying at school was concerned, I would always maintain that I was determined not to show any sign to those that are doing the bullying, to give them any sign that it affected me, because that would have pleased them even more. And I succeeded in not getting me down, except that the education suffered, as I mentioned. Now, I also mentioned my dad was a cattle dealer and we kept cows. And the only thing that I ever learned was to milk cows. By hand, that is. Machine milking wasn't even, I don't think, even thought about at that time. And then came the November Kristallnacht, where a young Jewish Polish student shot and killed a German embassy official. And this gave Hitler an opportunity to take his revenge on all Jewish people. All male people were arrested, taken to concentration camps, and told they were taken there for their own protection. And my dad was one of them. In the meantime, I'd been sent to a technical school that prepared older or students that passed their examinations, and young Jewish boys and girls to be prepared for an eventual emigration, either to Israel, United States, or to this country. And I was there for 9 months and thoroughly enjoyed it. It was an all-Jewish school, so you were on outside, on the outskirts of Berlin, on some Jewish premises, and so you felt quite at ease there, until one night in, I think it was in, let me think, 36, about 35, 36, when a group of young Nazis came onto the premises and set the joiner shop on fire, making sure that nobody could possibly try to put this fire under control. I mean, putting it out was just about impossible. If you can imagine dry wood shavings and dry wood, is there anything that will burn quicker and better? But anyway, the joiner shop was completely destroyed, and all the valuable machinery in there was worth nothing more than just scrap. I don't think it was ever rebuilt. I remember being still there for the clean-up period, and as the Kristallnacht came along, nobody except Great Britain offered any help whatsoever. And it was this country that didn't allow Jewish families to enter, because there already was a pretty large unemployment in this country, and the government at the time, and I can understand that, was afraid that bringing in what could be foreign labor in a period where there was already a large unemployment would cause problems. After further negotiations, the British government of the time allowed an unspecified number of Jewish children between the age of 2 years old and under 17 years old to enter this country. And it became known, some of you may know it, as Kindertransport. And it allowed children, Jewish children that is, between the ages 2 years old and under 17 years old to enter this country under strict restrictions that they would not be allowed to undertake any kind of work, paid or unpaid. It meant they had to be kept by voluntary contributions. By the 1st of December 1938, the first so-called Kindertransport left Berlin. I was lucky, and I think it was because I was in Berlin, that I got on the second Kindertransport to come to this country. At this point, I've got to say, and I thoroughly believe in it, that moment that I got onto the train to come to this country, or allowed to come here, My life changed completely. And I would always remember that what the then British government did, had it not been for that, I would not be sitting here. I do know that. The other thing I must say, I'm a national, not a born British subject, put it that way, and it means to me that I honestly believe that anybody that was born in this country could not feel more British than I do. Why? Because this government, the people at the time, talking about 1938, have saved my life and 10,000 or 9,999 more. And I can't speak for everybody, but I'm convinced that the biggest majority of those 10,000 children that were allowed to come to this country would not be living today had they not been allowed to come to this country. And again, it got to be mentioned that Great Britain at that time was the only country that made any effort to help Jewish people that were under terrific pressure. Now, after I came to this country, my life changed completely. Not had any education. What could I do? Nothing whatsoever, except milking cows. And that is, well, daft perhaps as it sounds, was it saved my life. Shortly before the outbreak of the Second World War, the British government lifted restrictions on, in this case, or in my case, the children that came over by allowing to undertake work, paid work, and only in coal mining and agriculture. Now, coal mining, I must say, didn't appeal to me at all. Milking cows, yes, I didn't mind that, I enjoyed that. And I can say, without trying to blow my own trumpet, there wasn't at that time anybody that I would have said, oh, well, you can milk better than I can. Because, well, it's blowing your own trumpet, but it proved it. And I'll tell you the story in a minute how. Anyway, it came to it that to get some of us children to work on a farm, sent to an agricultural training school. That turned out to be a Boston institution. And I personally got down the dumps, as you say, couldn't have gone lower. I maintained if I wasn't out of there within 12 months, they would have to carry me out. And well, again, milking cows saved my life. I volunteered to go into the cow shed there to prove that I was could milk well enough to be employed on a dairy farm. And they sent me into the cowshed at this institution, and I don't know, call him instructor if you like, pointed to one cow and told me to milk this particular cow and let him know when I finished, which I did. He came and checked. He never come anywhere near me after that, and I wasn't there that long either. They found me a job on a dairy farm at near Oxford, in a little village, and the reception I got there from two other men that milked at the same time and worked with me, or I worked with them, the difference made all the difference to my life. I felt like a human being again. I was treated like a human being by everybody that I came in contact with. Nobody pointed out and said, oh, you're a little Jew boy or whatever. You were part of the community there, although you weren't born there. And that made all the difference of settling. The other thing was, I was doing the jobs there that I was used to doing at home. So it felt a little bit like home, although it wasn't. And it showed up every evening. After I'd had my evening meal and I was in lodgings and gone to my room, the tears just streamed down my face. I hadn't heard from home, not to say what was going on. You got little bits of notes that told you they were alive, but that's all. Anything that would have given any pointer to what was really going on would have been never reached you. And had it been written, say, by my parents, they would have had the consequences of that, or had to suffer the consequences of that. And it wouldn't be very pleasant, I can tell you that. And anyway, it played on my mind, but I could work away during the day as happy as anything. Nobody would have any idea what was going on in here. And it came out every evening. The tears just would not stop. And I can assure you, those tears will never, ever stop. If I hear a documentary or see a film on the television or hear something on the radio that refers to, in any way whatsoever, to the Holocaust time, then a tear will appear and run down my cheek. I wipe it away and then I can cope again. But it means they never will stop. And I won't go into details, but because they're too cruel. I had about 10 days, maybe 12 days ago, a report from a friend that traced my relatives in Amsterdam to say what had happened. And it repeated the process of being as low as ever I could be. Enough said. And it concerned, by the way, a cousin of mine, her mother, her husband, and a little boy that was not even 2 years old at the time. And they all were murdered in a concentration camp, like all Jews. And the Dutch government officially states that 600 Jews in Holland committed suicide when the German troops marched into Holland. And they also maintain that this figure could be double, because they maintain that a lot of the people that committed suicide were never reported. Anyway, coming back to my own story, I received in 1983, I think it was, a request from the German town where I was born to come back there to attend an unveiling of a memorial in honor of the Jewish families that lived in the town. Now, I maintained I would never, ever go back to Germany. Why? Because I honestly believe if you're thrown out from anywhere through the front door, you don't go back in or try to go back in through the back door. So, having thought about it for a long while as to I should go back or not, I then decided I should go back because my family name would, without any doubt whatsoever, be on this remembrance stone. And at the time, I didn't know, but a girl that was born in the same town as myself and survived the labor camp, she didn't want to tell me the truth, but I literally forced her. Why? Because I wanted to know, as much as I could, what happened to my family. Would I ever see him again? Prior to that, on my journey to England, the train that took me went very near the town where I was born. Now, my dad, with other Jews that were arrested on the Kristallnacht, were released as long as they could prove that they fought with the German army in the First World War. And my dad was one of those, so he was released. He came home as I was due the next morning to go back to Berlin to get onto the Kindertransport. How he managed it, I will never know. He got onto the train that take me here, although there was Nazi guards on the train to prevent anybody else getting onto the train with the idea of getting into Holland. So, as I say, I have no idea how he managed to get onto that train. But prior to that, somehow he managed it. And he got onto the train about 20 minutes, maybe half an hour at maximum time, before we got to the Dutch-German border. Before that, as the train stopped at the border, the kind Nazi guards, I must put this in bracket, opened suitcases of the children that were on the train. And there was only children. They opened suitcases at random, took anything whatsoever that they thought may be useful to them, or even took something out just out of spite, just to destroy it. it meant that a lot of the children did not even have a photograph left of their parents. And imagine a child little over 2 years old. I mean, that would have been one of their proudest possessions. But how my mother ever thought about putting the family photo album in my suitcase, I will never know. The only thing I do know, my case luckily wasn't opened. And I then had the biggest treasure that I could possibly have, and that was a photo album concerning the family. And those photos are still in my possession. They will never, ever leave me. Copies have been made, yes, many of them. In some cases, I may not have even got the original photo back. I didn't mind, as long as it was the photo, even if it was just a copy. And so there's one photo in particular that I recognize where it was taken and when it could have been taken. And I think the possibility exists that that photo would have been the very last photo ever taken of me mother, father, and sister. And so that one is worth even more than the rest of them. It's something very, very special. And anyway, my dad got onto the train, as I said, had to get off at the Dutch border, and that was the last time I ever saw anyone of the family. And I didn't really realize it then, although I was 15 years old. Nobody ever said anything to me, told me why I was coming here, why I was on this train, what would happen, this, that, and the other. But plenty did happen, I can assure you. Namely, those Jewish children that some of them even had their parents already in this country, they were met off the train at Harwich. And those that have relatives, they picked them up. The very youngest children had mostly been allocated to families that volunteered to look after them, and they were there to meet them. But there was a group that got nowhere to go. They got nobody. No relatives, no friends, no nothing. And one of those was me. They then decided to house any refugee child wherever they could. Main cases was holiday camps, but why holiday camps, you would say? Well, it was December 1938. There wouldn't be many people on holiday in holiday camps by the seaside. But those that hadn't got anybody to go to, or weren't met by anybody, which included myself, we were sent to an empty holiday camp at Lowestoft by the sea. There were wooden huts, there was no heating whatsoever, and they gave you a hot water bottle at night. Oh, that was good. Yes, but that hot water bottle during the night, and this is really true, turned into a block of ice in the bed, even. And I, thinking, well, big-headed perhaps, yes, undressed the same as I would at home. I soon found out different. Namely, the first night was that miserable, I don't think I could have slept at all. So the following 6 or 7 nights, I forget how long we were there, I never undressed at all. I only took an overcoat and shoes off. The rest of the clothes stopped on for, I think, the next 6 or 7 nights. And you still got the hot water bottle every night, but it froze just the same as any other night. But leaving your clothes on made you feel a little bit more comfortable, and you may have had a little bit more sleep. And anyway, I maintain that when the tide came in, if you stepped out of this little wooden hut that they gave you to call your home, if you stepped out of that when the tide came in, you'd be stepping out straight into the sea. And I believe, had they not fastened those little wooden huts down, they would have been floating about in the sea. And I think it was one of the worst accommodations I ever had to put up with. But it didn't matter. I survived. That was the main point, although you didn't realize it. As I said, none of us ever thought that we'd never see parents again, or parents never thought they would never see their children again. That wasn't on the agenda. This was all a temporary absence. Well, carrying on from there, as I said, I got out of this holiday camp eventually, and it got to the time when I was sent to this agricultural training school, as they called it. But after volunteering to go into the cowshed and getting a job, I think it probably took about 3 weeks, maybe even less, from the time I asked to go into the cowshed till they found me a job. And as I said before, I never looked back after that. Except, as I say, the tears will never stop. They played a part of my life that will never end. Meeting the girl that survived the labor camp in Germany at that time when I was back there, she was the only survivor out of a group of 1,000 Jewish children and parents that were deported to Riga in Latvia. There was about 1,000 there on this particular transport, I think I mentioned it, and she was one of 5 survivors out of 1,000. And I've met several of them, so I know it's true. And I can point out here, if you think I'm telling a story of fibs just to make propaganda out of it, you're greatly mistaken. Anything that I'm not convinced 100% that is true, I wouldn't tell it. So, anyway, carrying on from there, I then got British nationality and feel today that anybody that's born in this country could not feel more British than I do. Why? The then British government and the population of this country saved my life by looking after me for the first 9 months that I was in this country. I then got this job and I've never looked back. I got married. I was married for 54 years. Unfortunately, wife passed away in 2001, and I lived on my own since. And make it the biggest business that I do now is talking about the Holocaust, about my own experience, without getting into detail of the cruelties that went on, because some of it that I experienced myself, not in Germany, but mental cruelty after you hear what happened to your own family and your relatives and close relatives, that when it hurts. But otherwise, I'm as happy as anybody can be. Why? Because I'm alive. I was allowed to live. People often say to me, "Oh, you've had a terrible hard life." My answer to that is no, never. "Oh, you must have a hard life." I said, "No," I said, 6 million were murdered. They didn't get the chance to live. I had that chance and got it, and took it with both hands. Yes, the other thing, people come and say, "Don't you think," some of you in the audience might think so, rightfully so, "don't you think it's time to forgive and forget?" I will conclude and say that will never, ever happen as far as I'm concerned. And that is one of the reasons why I can sit anywhere and talk to people that are willing to listen. And I've never, ever had an audience that felt bored and said, "Oh, why listen to all this crap?"
Bernard, thank you so much.